Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I managed to find somewhere safe to hide while I post this. But again, I can't stay here for long. I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. So last time I posted, I just met another hider, Jenny, and we'd agreed to team up. As we made our way out of that shop and back into the teeming masses outside, we tried our best to blend in. We walked close together, acting like close friends to try and avoid suspicion. "So, what are you going to do if you win the money?" she asked me curiously. Truth be told, I hadn't got an exact idea of what I would do with the money if I won. I knew it would be great to have that amount of money, but there was nothing specific that I could put my finger on. I'm not too sure, to be honest. I'll probably just buy myself a new house and a PlayStation and never work again. To be honest, I mainly joined as I thought a massive game of hide and seek would be fun. God knows I was wrong, I said. My voice dropped as I thought about the hunter again. Jenny let out a laugh and said, "Wow, you're thinking small scale. If I win, I'm going to use the money to finally move out of my parents' house. I love them both, but God knows that I need my own space. I might even get a city apartment or something and try to start my own business. The world would be my oyster," she said, a faraway look overtaking her. I felt for her. She was just a young adult, wanting to make a new start in life. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing that I'd considered abandoning her for a larger share of the prize. We continued to walk and talk like this for about an hour or so, and I would scan around for hunters, keeping my eyes locked onto the faces of passerbys, and Jenny would do the same, pretending to look into shop windows while using the reflections in the glass to screen nearby shoppers. I'm not gonna lie, it felt good to not be on my own. I was really enjoying our little partnership. We were a team, and for the first time since that car crash, I really felt like things were starting to look up and that we could genuinely do this. After a few more loops around the mall, we were both starving. Deciding to get something to eat, there was no sense in not eating just because we were hiding. We'd be weak and easy pickings. In fact, it would add to our cover with how busy it would be. Just two normal friends getting dinner together, I argued. I could tell from Jenny's expression that she thought that it was a great idea, even if she did seem slightly apprehensive about the hunters. As casually as we could, we made our way to the food court, all the while keeping up the facade of being regular shoppers. The smells of pizza and burgers filled my nostrils, causing my stomach to gurgle loudly. Practically salivating at this point, I told Jenny that we needed to pick up the pace before I pass out. From the lack of protest from her, she must have been in the same position. Passing several people as we entered the courtyard that was the food court, we didn't see any signs of hunters. We'd actually only had one close call all afternoon when Jenny panicked, thinking that she'd spotted one in a queue in a candle shop. We both made a speedy getaway, frantically checking back in the opposite direction. But after checking through the email again, she realized that she had made a mistake. Unless the hunter had somehow grown a beard in the last few hours, it wasn't anything to worry about. "So, then, what are you feeling?" I asked her. I was too hungry to decide. Everything looked delicious, so I hope she had something particular in mind. Pizza, maybe? She floated, as her eyes locked on a deep pan pizza stand. Oh, good choice, I exclaimed. We each ordered a large pizza, meat lovers for me and pepperoni and peppers for her. And making our way over to the seating area to eat, the delicious smell of molten cheese began filling our nostrils. We were ravenous, and as I devoured the first heavenly slice of that pizza, I felt my stomach grumble thankfully. We had sat down, pizza slices in hand, when I decided to do one last scan of the area. And as my eyes moved from person to person, I'd nearly completed my sweep when I saw something that made me drop the slice of pizza I was holding. Another hunter was sitting at the other end of the food court. I'd not seen him on my way in. He'd been obscured by one of the central pillars. He'd obviously had the same idea about refueling as us. Kicking myself for being so careless, I was thankful that the hunter was equally as unaware of his surroundings. He was focused on the large burger on the plate in front of him. "Jenny," I hissed in a hushed tone. She turned to face me, a slice of pizza inches away from her mouth. She picked up on the urgency in my voice, staring at me wide-eyed. "Yeah?" "Don't look straight away, and for God's sake be inconspicuous. But I think there's a hunter sitting at the other end of the food court, over there in the corner by the pillar." "What? Oh God," she shakily replied, panic breaking out across her face. Slowly, she turned her head to look at him, waiting a few seconds as though pretending to read the menu of a nearby stall before looking back at me. "Nope, I don't see anyone," she sighed, sounding relieved. "What? Are you sure? I could swear it was one of the guys from the email." I hissed again, confused. "I swear it was one of the hunters. I was convinced." "Nope, he's just a normal guy." Another false alarm, she said jovially, smiling at me with a reassuring smile. "Ah, thank God. I swear, he looks just like one of those guys." I sighed, relieved, as I turned around casually to look again. As my eyes swept across the food court, my eyes locked onto the man in the corner again, and before they had a chance to focus, I felt a searing pain in my head, and the world went black as I fell from my chair with an almighty clatter. When the world came back to me, I could hear muffled shouting and screams, my vision swimming as I woke up on the floor. There were people running and yelling and screaming over one another. Why was I on the floor? As I tried to focus on the sounds, I could hear another more familiar voice breaking through over the rest. It took me a while to figure out who it was, but as I did, I felt a sting of pain in my heart. "Hey, you, over here, we got a hider." That voice, it was Jenny. What the hell was she doing? Mustering what felt like a gargantuan amount of effort, I forced myself over and onto my side. Jenny was standing above me, looking over me towards the other end of the food court. "You're a hunter, right? Well, come and get him. This one's for free." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What was she doing? I felt a pang of tears along with the confusion welling up inside me. I thought we were a team. "Jenny?" I managed to force out weakly. She turned down to look at me, an expression of genuine sadness creeping across her face. "I'm really sorry, David, but I really need the money. You understand, right? It's just a game after all," she said, before turning on her heel and running as fast as she could, disappearing into the crowd. I watched her as she went, tears filling my eyes. I was so embarrassed, so confused. Pain filled my heart as a stream of thoughts flooded my mind. How could she have betrayed me like this, handing me over to the hunters? I thought we were a great team, and I was really starting to like her. The anger welled up within me as I kicked myself for being so stupid. Why had I thought trusting another hider was a good idea? I should have seen this coming. What with a large prize and all. I can't say I wouldn't have done the same if I hadn't already had an encounter with the hunters. As she ran, I could see her tuck something into her bag. It looked shiny and metallic, like a small handgun. A terrifying thought burst to the front of my brain, causing my blood to run cold and my vision to swim again. My head was pounding. Had she shot me? Shakily, I raised my hand to my head, dreading the gaping hole that I would find where part of my skull used to be. Frantically touching my head, relief washed over me as I realized that my head felt like it did before, albeit a bit more sore. She must have hit me around the back of my head with the butt of the gun when my back was turned. Anger welled up again as I couldn't believe that I'd let myself get that comfortable. She was a stranger after all. She'd done nothing to earn my trust other than be on the hider's team and make me laugh a couple of times. Still, the betrayal hurt though. I was snapped back to the current moment by the sounds of screams getting closer to me. Spinning my head to my left, I could see a line of people being forcefully parted in the sea of shoppers that were before me. The hunter. In all of my confusion and grief about Jenny's betrayal, I'd forgotten that the hunter would be coming to get me. He was barreling through the crowd, quickly closing the distance between us. Frantically, I tried my best to get to my feet, slipping and stumbling as the world span. Adrenaline helped me to get enough composure to run semi-coherently. My mind was scrambled. The only thought occupying it now was that I needed to get away. Although I had no idea where to go. I started running in the opposite direction to the screams. It was all that I could think to do. And I broke into a loping sprint, trying to force my legs to work faster while also not collapsing from underneath me. The screams behind me seemed to get louder in a deafening crescendo as another sound ripped through the air that made my blood freeze in my veins. An explosion of powder from one of the tiles near my right foot accompanied it, and I had to make a physical effort to keep control of my already failing legs. A gunshot. That lunatic hunter was shooting at me. All sense left me at this point. This was even worse than the one that crashed into me with his car. How was this allowed? The rules had said that they couldn't kill or incapacitate me. But there was nothing about slowing me down by shooting my leg or maiming me. It wasn't something that occurred to me at that time. Then, darker thoughts raced through my mind, causing a shiver to run down my spine. There were hardly any limits to what they could do to catch me. As long as I was intact and not dead, the organizers would count that as acceptable. Whirling from this new realization, pure survival instinct carried me. I needed to get away. More than just winning the game counted on it now. Running as fast as I could, I ran through corridor after corridor of the mall, shops flying by at a breakneck speed. The fog in my brain from being dazed had now completely cleared with the sound of that gunshot. I hardly felt the throbbing in my head anymore, or the protesting of my burning legs. All that mattered was getting away from the psycho with a gun. I don't know how long I'd been running for, but the screams and thundering footsteps behind me told me that the hunter wasn't giving up. I could still hear his frantic footsteps coming from behind me as the screams from the mall goers rose up. Another shot flew past me, when I rounded the corner to one of the corridors on my right, narrowly missing where my left shoulder had been. My lungs were burning. Each breath felt like liquid fire, and although my head wasn't throbbing anymore, I could tell deep down that something was wrong. My legs were beginning to shake from the exertion, and my chest felt tighter with each breath, and my shattered ribs screaming for me to stop. The car crash must have done more damage than I initially released. Horror filled me as I realized that there was no way that I'd be able to keep this up. I just couldn't outrun him. I had to hide. It was the only way I might get out of this. Panic-stricken, I scanned around frantically, looking for anywhere that might conceal me, somewhere that would allow me to catch my breath and lose my tail. After what felt like too long searching, I spotted a small island in the middle of the corridor up ahead. The concrete edges were around 2 feet tall, and there were several plants growing within it that would hide me if I could just get to the other side. Summoning one last effort, I pushed myself, my burning lungs rattling as I gulped down fresh breaths of air. Skidding clumsily to a halt, I dived behind it, spreading myself across the floor and pressing against the sides of the concrete base, trying to conceal myself against it. I heard the frantic steps of the hunter just moments after entering the corridor. They seemed too slow, obviously noticing that I was nowhere to be seen. My heart pounded in my chest as slowly they made their way closer to my hiding spot. If they looked around and saw me, that would be it. There was no way that I'd be able to get up and run again in time. I closed my eyes, expecting the worst, only for them to come to a stop a few meters away from where I had concealed myself. I waited, every fiber of my being shaking, for the sound of the footsteps to leave or move into one of the other shops. I don't know how long I sat like that, listening, praying that maniac with a gun would just leave. I could hear my heart beating in my ears and my shallow breathing like they were amplified. After what felt like several minutes, I dared a glance over the edge of the concrete that concealed me. If I was careful, the plants would conceal me and allow me to at least get a better look at the hunter. Slowly counting down in my mind, I gingerly raised my head. Obscured by the leaves of the plants on the island, I could make him out clearly. He was sitting on the benches opposite my hiding place, pretending to look at the surrounding shops. My heart sank a little as I realized that he must have assumed that I was hiding in one of them and was waiting for me to come out. I could see the glint of black metal partially concealed by his coat, drawing my attention. He still had his hand on the gun, ready and waiting. I couldn't stay here like this. All it would take was for him to walk over this way, and he would see me. Frantically scanning around, I looked for any possible means of escape. And after several dead ends, my eyes locked on a door to my left, marked as maintenance. A thought began forming. If I was lucky, maybe, just maybe, it would be unlocked and I could lose him in the tunnels. I began weighing up my options in my mind. I could stay here and possibly get caught when the hunter got bored of waiting and decided on a more thorough examination. Or I could make a run for that door and hopefully lose him. I'd need to be quick though. If I could get in there as fast as I could, then maybe he wouldn't see me. He might just think that it was a member of staff. I didn't like this plan. The idea of running again made me feel sick, and my head and chest were screaming with pain. But I didn't have any more options, and if I stayed here, I doubted my head and chest would be the only parts of me in pain. I had to do this. If I waited for him to look the other way and ran, I might be through the door before he had a chance to look back. Glancing through the leaves again, his attention seemed to be fixed on one of the shops to his left. This was it. I didn't like it, but I didn't know when I would get another chance. Shakily, and as quickly as I could, I got to my feet and I broke into a charge, slamming full pelt into the door, bursting through it and into the concrete-lined tunnels behind. This was it, I thought, anticipation welling up in me. I would be free. A shot rang out, and one of the blocks in front of me spat out a small explosion of powder. My heart sank like a stone. So much for that. He'd seen me. All I could do now was run, skidding around the corner of the access corridor into a much longer one. There were several workers in this area, all on their lunch breaks, and when they caught the sight of me running around the corner, they began angrily yelling at me that I shouldn't be in there. I ignored them, screaming at them to get back and to get away from the maniac with a gun behind me. I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if this hunter accidentally caught one of them in the crossfire because I decided to try and escape down this corridor. They just stared at me blankly, confused expressions plastered over their faces. All the while, the echoing footsteps of my pursuer were bouncing around the walls. I carried on running, turning again around another corner and vanishing from the sight of the workers. Frantically, my eyes scanned the area, looking for a way out or another hiding place. They settled on a door underneath a glowing red sign marked Exit. If I could get outside, then maybe I could lose him in the parking lot or find somewhere else to hide. There was a commotion from behind me that made my scalp tighten. The raised voice of the workers and the shouting of the hunter before an almighty bang from another shot and the screams of the workers. Then the footsteps started up again, getting closer. I was terrified. I had images of the hunter shooting one of the workers for trying to stop him, and them now lying in a pool of their own blood, surrounded by their colleagues, just because I decided to run through these corridors. I mustered what little resolve I had left, and I charged for the exit door, knowing that there was nothing I could do for them now. Another shot from behind me indicated that my pursuer was still on my trail. I noticed a horrible burning sensation in my left calf, but I tried my best to ignore it. It wasn't important right now. I just needed to escape. A warm trickle made its way down my calf and into my sock, soaking it slowly. I knew that if I looked at my leg, whatever composure that I had left would leave me and I would surely be caught. Dragging my injured leg behind me as I reached the door, I frantically forced it open. And thankfully, it was unlocked. I ran through before slamming it shut behind me. Looking around at my surroundings, I was in a courtyard surrounded by a chain-link fence. There were several dumpsters and other random piles of trash scattered throughout the courtyard. This must have been the wall's waste disposal area, I thought to myself. Eyes darting around for anything that I could use to barricade the door, I noticed a discarded metal chair from the food court just to my left. I grabbed it and I forced it under the handle of the door. It wasn't going to stop someone from getting through forever. The flimsy metal would buckle long before that, but it would at least slow them down. Turning back around, my heart sank as I scanned the area. I knew I wouldn't be able to climb over that fence easily, not with enough time to run away without getting shot. There didn't look like there were any other exits either, only this fence and the door behind me. The only thing I could do now was hide, But then would the hunter be expecting that? It would be pretty obvious as there would be nowhere else for me to go. I began to feel the tickling fingers of despair clawing at my mind, and I realized how hopeless my situation was. Then, like a flash, an idea began forming in my head. With renewed vigor, I limped over to the chain-link fence, my calf now throbbing in time with my heartbeat, my socks squelching with each step. Reaching out a hand, I grasped the cold metal of the fence between my fingers. With a determined breath, I shook the fence as hard as I could, making as much noise as it would allow me to. And after a few seconds, I stopped shaking the metal and I jumped, landing as loudly as I possibly could. Over to my shoulder, I could hear the banging coming from the door that I'd blocked with a chair. The hunter was trying to force it open, throwing his weight against it. I was banking on the fact that he'd heard the racket that I'd made with the fence. I needed this to work. Moving over to the nearest dumpster and holding my breath, I slowly and gently opened the lid, trying to be as quiet as possible. I was dreading this part of my plan. Hiding in a dumpster wasn't something I would enjoy, but if it meant that I got away without being shot again, then it was something that I was going to have to do. Gazing over the edge of the huge metal container, I could see several black bin bags. A waft of stale air clung to my nostrils, but I wasn't met with the horrific stench that I was expecting. Still, I dreaded to think of the rotting food and disgusting creatures that might be residing in this dumpster. Vomit tickled its way up to my throat just thinking about it. I was beginning to have second thoughts, considering checking another dumpster. Perhaps there was an empty one. But I was about to turn around when I heard a cracking noise from the door, and I knew that the chair holding it wasn't long for this world. Fear rising in me again, I bit the bullet, clambering into the dumpster as quietly as I could, and as my feet touched the bags, they seemed to sink in, absorbed by the black plastic. But they weren't met with a slimy consistency like I was expecting. Relieved, I noted that it was the opposite. The bags felt quite soft, almost fluffy. And looking down again, I saw through a split in one of the bin bags that they were filled with clothing. I thanked my lucky stars. I must have chosen a bin from one of the clothing outlets. The banging from the door snapped me back to the task at hand. Quickly, I closed the dumpster lid, trying to be as quiet as possible. And almost as soon as I'd snapped the lid into place, I heard an almighty crack as the chair blocking the door shattered. In the darkness of the dumpster, I heard the door slam as it was thrown open and bounced against the wall. The sound of frustrated footsteps echoed throughout the courtyard as the hunter made his way outside. I could hear him muttering something to himself as he searched for me. I closed my eyes and waited with bated breath. I could hear him walking around in what seemed like circles looking for me. Then everything went silent. My mind went wild in the dark, all manner of thoughts about what the hunter could be doing bubbling up in my brain. Was he going to wait here expecting that I was hiding? Would he leave and then come back later? Or would he assume that I'd made it over the fence and climbed it himself? It felt like hours that I sat there, all the while just waiting for the lid of the dumpster to fly back and an arm to reach in and grab me. Then there was an almighty slam as a pile of trash at the other end of the yard was toppled over. The sound caught me off guard, and before I could stop myself, a little whimper escaped my lips. The sound stopped immediately, and I heard another sound that made the color drain from my face. The footstep had started up again, and they were getting closer. Each footstep I heard cut through the cold silence of the dumpster and echoed around in my head. I could hear my heart beating in my chest. It couldn't end like this. I'd spent so much time and effort and experienced so much fear. I survived a car crash, running across a main road, and being shot, only to be captured in a dumpster like a fish in a barrel. All because I couldn't suppress one stupid sound. The only thing I could think to do was to press myself as hard as I could into the bags. It seemed pointless, but there was nothing else that I could do. I was trapped. Quickly but quietly, I moved the bags around me and covered myself, trying to become as small as possible. I lay there, waiting for the hunter to rip the lid from the dumpster and find me here. I was just about to accept my fate when I heard something I wasn't expecting. An almighty rattle, followed by a heavy thud, then quick footsteps leading away from me. I almost cried. My ruse must have worked. He must have thought that I'd climbed the fence and ran through the houses on the other side. I let out a shaking breath, my body intensing as a huge wave of relief washed over me. Still, I waited for several minutes before moving. After all, this may have been a trap. Pressing my ear to the cold metal of the dumpster, I listened carefully with bated breath for any sign that there was still someone out there. And when no sounds met my ears, I slowly slid back the lid of the dumpster, slowly poking my head out as I chanced to look into the courtyard. It was abandoned, just as I found it. The only indication that the hunter had been there was the scattered remains of the chair that I used on the door and a ransacked pile of trash on the other end of the yard. Joy washed over me as I realized that I'd evaded him. Thank God, I'd managed to escape. I knew that I couldn't stay here though. It was too dangerous. If the hunters were going to use methods like this, then populated places wouldn't work. I need somewhere out of the way, somewhere that no one would ever think to look at, and that had several places that I could easily hide. Racking my brains, my mind wandered to a small internet cafe that I frequented. It was a little place down a side street on the outskirts of town. Normally you'd find 3 or 4 people there maximum. Yes, I thought to myself that it would be perfect as long as I did not get sloppy and get followed. I began to make my way there. The hunter had jumped the fence and I wasn't about to follow him, so I decided that it would be best for me to make my way back through the mall. I knew it was dangerous as there were far less people around now, with it being nearly closing time. But it was still safer than taking my chances going to the same way as the hunter. As I started to slowly limp back through the concrete maintenance tunnel, my leg burning with each step, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. It was funny, in all the fear and panic, I'd forgotten that it was even there. And thank God that it didn't go off when I was in the dumpster. I shuddered at the thought. Pulling it out of my pocket and unlocking the screen, it was shattered. Ah, crap. Probably from the crash. I sighed, annoyed at the fact that I would now need to buy a new phone. I could still make out a notification at the top of the screen. It was an email, and dragging down the navigation bar, I could see that it was from the same garbled mess of characters that had sent the mail before. Even with everything that happened, I'm pretty sure that the contents of the email were the worst part of all of this. I need to move again. They're closing up shop now, so I need to find a new hiding place before the owners come up here. But I'll post the rest of this when I get to another safe spot. I've managed to find another safe place. Well, as safe as any place seems right now anyway. So much has changed since I last posted, and I wasn't sure if I would get a chance to again. I'm still not sure if it's a good idea, as they're undoubtedly monitoring me. But I don't care. I need to get this out there, even if nobody believes me. So, in my last post, I just managed to escape from that psycho hunter who chased me through the mall after tricking him into thinking that I jumped over a fence. I'd love to tell you that it was the end of it. But then my phone buzzed with a notification. I don't think I quite understood how dire my situation was until I opened the notification. When I tapped on it, I could see that it was an email from the same garbled mess of characters that had sent the mail before. My stomach fluttered as I skimmed over the subject. Day 1 updates and ratings. I'll be honest, in all of the running and fearing for my life, I'd forgotten entirely about the game having a point system. I was just too focused on survival. A sense of apprehension filled me as I read the subject again. This game wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I wondered how many other people were in my position or were worse off. Nervously, I tapped on the notification and opened the mail. The mail app loaded quickly, revealing a mail that was blank all but a single URL. I couldn't make anything out of it. It was another garbled mess of characters, not from any site that I recognized. Tentatively, I hovered my finger over it. A warning tickle creeping up my spine before tapping it, not sure of exactly what to expect. And as soon as my thumb made contact with the link, my phone screen went dark. Oh great, just great, I muttered to myself, frustrated. But after a second, the screen sprang back to life, bursting into a flurry of activity. Several screens opened and closed rapidly, too quickly for me to make out what they were, although they looked similar to the command prompt windows that you see on a computer. I had no idea what was going on, and all I could do was stare at my phone, helpless to stop whatever it was doing. But then as suddenly as it had all started, it all stopped. My phone was as still and as silent as it was before, sitting there on the home screen waiting for my command. As I looked it over, I could make out only one sign that something had happened. There, in the center of my home screen, was a new app that I had never seen before, and I had no memory of downloading it. It was a plain black square titled, The Devil's Games. Assuming that the app was some kind of malware that the game organizers had installed on my phone, and not trusting them in the slightest, nor wanting any more obstacles in this horrific game, I went to highlight it and then remove it. But much to my confusion, it wouldn't budge. I pressed the uninstall button several times, but the app just sat there unperturbed, ignoring my request. I was about to try again when the app opened by itself and plunged my phone screen into darkness. After a second, I could make out something in the center of the screen. It looked almost like a small video player embedded into the darkness. It was hard to see as it was nearly as dark as the background. Confused now, I really didn't know what to think. Maybe it wasn't malware at all. Maybe it was just some janky app for them to send out updates to us players through. This game had been set up on the dark web after all, so nothing was top quality. Just as I was pondering this, the video in the center of the screen changed, catching my attention. I could make something out now. The quality was poor, very poor, as though whatever had been used to film it was either really old or streaming over an exceptionally low bandwidth. I brought the phone closer to my face, squinting through the pixels to try and make out some kind of detail. I could just about make out a dark room, and it looked like there was a large wooden platform in the distance occupying the center, with a tall podium in the middle. I couldn't see much else though. I also noticed a small number in the bottom right-hand corner in plain white text. It seemed to be incrementing. It was in the tens of thousands and still climbing at a steady rate. This was just strange. What the hell was this video even about? I was just about to close off the app when I noticed movement to the right of the stage. Something was happening. I sat there, my phone inches away from my face, as what looked like a group of people made their way from the right-hand side of the screen. They were walking strangely, some limping, others holding injuries. They each had an odd look on their faces, but the feed was too poor for me to make it out. And once they reached the center of the stage, they split off into two groups, 6 of them staying on the right side and 3 moving off to the left. All the while, they were all looking over their shoulder to somewhere just off the right-hand side of the screen. It took me a second, but I realized that there must be someone just off-screen orchestrating where they were going. And just as the thought came to me, a large, hooded figure wearing a mask moved into the frame on the stage, going up to each of the 9 people. I couldn't make out exactly what he was doing, but it looked like the people cowered as he approached, although none tried to defend themselves when he grabbed their hands. I was thoroughly confused. What the hell did this video have to do with the rankings, and what the hell was I watching? All the while, that number in the bottom right corner was still going up, adding to my confusion. Then, without warning, the video shook and the stage came closer into clearer focus, as though someone had physically moved the camera closer to it. And although the quality was still poor, I could now make out far more than before. What I could see sent a chill down my spine. The people on the stage were terrified. Some had injuries, others were just crying, but each wore an expression of fear and defeat on their faces. I could now clearly see what the large masked man had done to each of them when he moved onto the stage. Their hands were tied with thick chains, which then led behind them to the back of the stage, where they were tied to an anchor point, holding the people in place. A flurry of movement from the left of the screen caught my eye as a man seemed to dance into frame, and the stage was illuminated by a large spotlight. He was a tall man in a fancy-looking black suit, wearing a bird mask. There was a pit in my stomach as I recognized him as the mascot on the website that I'd signed up for this game on. His dapper appearance and jovial attitude seemed to contrast with the terrified expressions of the people behind him. Their eyes were fixed on him, petrified. He seemed to be waving something around in his hand as he danced across the stage, something small and silver glinting in the bright spotlight. And with a sudden jolt of terror, I saw the barrel that it ended in and the unmistakable shape of a pistol in his right hand. Jovially dancing his way to the podium, the man ended his elaborate dance and a deep bow before straightening up and leaning into the microphone on the podium. "Welcome one and all. Welcome. Well, there's sure a lot of you here this evening. We're so glad you could join us. But we know what you paid for, so let's get this show on the road," he said in an almost sing-song voice. Something in what he just said stuck with me. Paid for. I hadn't had to pay for anything. Had the other players? I was staring at the screen when it struck me. Was this a video? Or was this a stream? That number in the bottom corner, was that the amount of people paying to view it right now? He had said there was a lot of us this evening. I felt sick. That number was in the tens of thousands, and there were only 50 of us in the game. I didn't have time to contemplate this further before the men started up again. So folks, the numbers are in, and here are today's eliminations, he said, whimsically gesturing behind him with a gun. The terrified people are on the stage, cowering, as it swept across their heads. Hunters first, he said, before gracefully making his way to the left of the stage. There were 3 people there, each of them staring at the masked man, terrified as he paced backwards and forwards in front of them like a ringmaster before a lion. With a start, I recognized one of the 3. It was the man who had crashed into my car earlier today. He had several large cuts across his face and patches of blood staining his clothing. He was also holding one arm, which looked to be in a cast, as well as his right leg. He looked as though he was about to cry. If he had gone to the hospital after chasing me across that road, then these people must have kidnapped him from there. And as much as it pains me to admit, I did feel a sick sense of irony that he had been kidnapped by these people when he had effectively tried to do the same to me earlier today. These 3 have no points whatsoever, and we don't need any hunters who can't hunt, so they're out of here, said the announcer, mimicking a baseball commenter. In a flash, he raised the gun and let off 3 quick shots. The hunters collapsed, clutching their stomachs, and the stage background behind them sprayed crimson with blood. The color drained from my face, and the world seemed to fold in on itself. I struggled to hear the rest of what he said over the screams of the 6 hiders as he merrily danced his way over to them. I felt sick. What the hell was happening? I knew there were hardly any rules in the game, but nowhere mentioned being killed for failing. I wanted to cry. Those poor people. But then, a terrifying thought struck me. If either of those 2 hunters had caught me, I'd be up there too, standing chained before that psychotic bird-masked man. The announcer's voice came through again, breaking the silence and snapping me back into reality. I didn't want to watch what happened next. I knew what he was going to do, but I couldn't command myself to look away. And these unlucky hiders managed to get caught. You know what that means, he said, again in that sing-song voice, before letting off several more shots, each bang followed by a chorus of screams from all the hiders. Some tried to run as they watched their fellow contestants collapse, but the chains around their wrist held them in place. And within a few seconds, the stage was silent. Each hider slumped over in a large pool of crimson red. After the final hider fell, the announcer turned back to face the camera. That's it today for eliminations. Well done to the rest of you guys and gals. But what fun would the game be if we didn't mix things up? My heart sank. What did he mean by mix things up? The game was already dangerous enough as it was. A cold fear washed over me as I dreaded to think of what they would do next. And to add just a bit more spice to this already stellar start to the game. We're reducing the size of the play area. Everybody, get nice and cozy now. But that should be no problem for you skilled players now, should it? Have fun, and remember, don't get caught. His words seemed to darken as he said the last sentence. Then the feed cut abruptly and stopped, leaving only the black background on the screen reflecting my stunned face. I was numb. What the hell was this? They were killing people now. This was supposed to be a fun, scaled-up version of a children's game. That's what the site had promised, not some kind of sick snuff entertainment site for freaks on the dark web to get their kicks. Lifting a trembling finger, I tapped the close button that had appeared on the video player. It was slow to respond, but after a few seconds, I found myself on what I assumed was the site's homepage. It was minimalistic, just like the feed, a plain black site with several links to other videos. They all seemed to be named based on the children's games, like the names of the games on the site that I'd been on when this all started. Each had a number next to them and an icon of a coin, and it took me a few seconds to understand what I was seeing. With horror, the realization of what was going on struck me like a bolt of lightning. The organizers of the game were using us. This site must have been some kind of honey trap trying to entice people into what they thought was a fun large-scale game. Then once we'd signed up and given our permissions, we'd discover that we were just participants in their sick site, helping them to make entertaining content for their deprived watchers on the dark web. The prize money, reducing people's suspicions, was the perfect way to get them to sign up, not realizing what was going on until it was too late. I felt sick. Bile rose in my throat and my mind was reeling. I had to sit down. What the hell do I do now? How can I get out of this? 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind, each one of them shouting over each other in a maddening cacophony. Maybe, if I just get out of the area of play, I could get away, run far enough that the organizers wouldn't be able to catch up with me. The fifth rule from the site echoed in my brain. Once you're in, you're in. No backing out until the game is complete. I had no idea how far these people would go in order to punish me if I broke the rule. But then again, I had no idea how long I'd be able to survive in this sinister competition. Another snagging thought reminded me that there was also no guarantee that they would let me live if I won anyway. As I sat there, wallowing in despair in my churning thoughts, my phone gently buzzed. Picking it up, I noted that it was an email from that same address again. What now? What more could they possibly want from us now? I whispered, defeated. The subject of this mail was titled, New Play Area. When I shakily opened it, expecting the worst, I found that it contained only a single screenshot from Google Maps with a crude red circle drawn around it. Studying it, I determined that this must be the new area that the announcer in the video was talking about at the end. A sinking feeling spread through my stomach as I inspected it. It was a lot smaller than the city, only containing the city center and a few other areas outside. Did they seriously expect anyone on the Hiders team to have a chance? There was no way anyone would be able to hide for 13 days in that tiny area. Not with the amount of us left. Then again, I thought to myself with a shiver, they probably didn't care. They just wanted to make the show as entertaining as possible for the viewers, and we would be an afterthought at best. Reviewing it again, I noticed the mall that I was currently in was located just on the edge of this new area, just a short walk away from the boundary. I was almost as far out as I could be. That's it, I thought to myself. I'm getting out of this game. I'm not playing anymore. And as quickly as I could, I rose to my feet, my left leg screaming as I put my weight on it, nearly giving away. I looked down at it and immediately wished that I hadn't. My head began to spin and the acidic taste of vomit welled at the back of my throat. My leg looked awful. There was a river of thick ruby blood running down each side of it, pulling the cuff of my sock before leaking down over my now blood-stained shoes. The blood was streaming from about halfway up my calf. I could see the hole in my jeans where the bullet had made its way back out into the world after tearing its way through the muscles and sinew that stood before it. I could clearly see the concrete behind me through the now gaping hole. And now that the adrenaline had worn off, it hurt like hell. I couldn't go to the hospital. I knew it wasn't safe there. That maniac driver had gone there, and now look at what had happened to him. Plus, with the hunters now confined to a much smaller area, there was no guarantee that I would even make it there at all. The only thing I could think to do was to try and bandage my leg up as best as I could and deal with it later when it was safe. I looked around, scanning the courtyard for anything that I could use to bandage my bleeding limb. Nothing really immediate came to view, and I was about to give up and go and look for something in the mall when I remembered the dumpster. It was full of clothing. It was also in black bags, so although not sanitized, it's not like it would be disease-ridden either. I hobbled over there, stumbling a few times as my injured leg tried to buckle. I fell onto the side of the dumpster, letting it hold my weight as I fished around for the nearest bag, hoping that it would have something suitable that I could use. Grasping tightly to the black plastic, I yanked it out before tearing it open to reveal its contents. Several linen shirts sprawled out as the plastic gave way, and relief washed through me as this was just what I needed. Tearing off the sleeves of a couple of the shirts, I tied them tightly around the gaping hole in my leg, trying not to focus on the torn muscles within. Pain flared in me like a fire, spreading up my leg and into my very being as I tightened the makeshift bandages. Cold sweat broke across my forehead and I began seeing stars in my vision. I was just about to pass out from the pain, but thankfully, it dissipated. Getting to my feet again, my legs still throbbed and burned, but it at least felt slightly more supported now. Though I had no idea how I would be able to run again with it in this state. I slowly limped across the courtyard, the door back into the mall getting ever closer. Making my way through it, the memory of the screams of the workers from before jumped to the forefront of my mind. I couldn't go back that way. I couldn't bear to see what the aftermath of my decision to run through these tunnels looked like, because I don't think that I'd be able to live with myself. I slowly glanced around, noting another corridor leading off to the right. I had no idea where it went, but it was sure as hell better than going the way I'd come. I limped along through it for what felt like hours, before finding a door that led back into the main mall plaza. All the while, I felt weak and sick, my leg burning, and the events of that video feed reeling around in my head. The mall was almost deserted now. There were a few stragglers finishing up their shopping before the stores closed their shutters. Most paid me no mind as I limped past, although a few stared at me in horror as they noticed my bloody left leg. I ignored them when they tried to ask me what had happened or if I needed help. And even if they wanted to help, there was nothing they could do for me now. Making my way out of the mall, the cool evening air hit me. I began shakily heading in the direction of the new boundary, all the while checking over my shoulder for any trace of the hunters. I couldn't run anymore in this state, and it would be stupid to get caught now when I was so close to escape. My heart began pounding in my chest, reverberating in my eardrums, and I walked the quickly darkening streets towards the edge of the play area. I was relieved not to have seen anyone so far, but the overwhelming tension that I felt was crushing. As I slowly approached where I thought the boundary was, I did my best to dart between the nearby houses, concealing myself as best as I was able to, then checking around for any particularly enterprising hunters who may be waiting near the edges to catch me. Much to my relief, there was no one. No hunters, no organizers, no one. I made it! Breathing a sigh of relief, I took a step over the boundary and began to move as quickly as my burning leg would allow. I had no idea where I was going, but I needed to move to get as far away as I could until this game was over and I could go about my normal life again. I'd made it maybe 3 steps when my phone buzzed again. That little sound, so innocuous, seemed to ring through my ears with a heavy weight. I wanted to ignore it, to check it when I was safe, but something clawed at the back of my mind like an itch. Slowing my pace to a gentle walk, I reached my phone out of my pocket. Unlocking it, the shattered screen revealed the new notification. It was a text message. The number was not any that I recognized, just a random string of digits. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up and my teeth were on the edge. It had to be from the organizers. I shakily tapped on it, the message expanding on the screen, and it contained only a picture and 2 words. They made me freeze in my place and my blood run cold. It took all of my strength not to break down crying. The picture in the message was dark, but I could clearly make out its contents. It was a picture of a house, my house. I recognized it immediately, and through the living room window, I could clearly see the unmistakable faces of my wife and child going about their evening. The picture looked like it was taken from just across the street. There were twigs and leaves at the edge of the frame, and I realized with horror that whoever it was that sent the message was sitting in the bushes just opposite my house and watching my family. They thought I was away for 2 weeks on business, and they had no idea of the danger that they were in. I felt weak, the bile rising in my throat again. Then, I read the text underneath the picture, and all of my strength left me. I dropped to my knees, sending a lightning bolt of pain burning up through my injured leg. There were only 2 words, but they were enough to shatter my world. Turn back. These people knew where I lived. They were outside my house, and who knows what they would do to my wife if I stopped playing. Tears welled up in my eyes and I burst into a fit of tears, pain racking my broken ribs with each heavy sob. I was trapped. If I carried on playing this monstrous game, I'd likely lose my life. But if I tried to escape then, these maniacs would kill my family and probably still come after me too. There was nothing I could do, and this was all my fault. If I'd not joined the stupid game, then none of this would have happened. I was stupid to think that I could have snuck out of bounds. They must have been tracking my phone. That's why there was no one waiting on the border. They didn't need anyone to keep watch. They already knew. Pulling myself back to my feet, I turned back around and I limped across the border, defeated. Slunking back to the area of play, the only thing I could think of was to go back to my original plan of going back to the cafe. That's where I am right now, writing this. I can't say exactly where the hunters are monitoring. All I know is I can't get caught. There's too much at stake now. I wished I'd never joined this stupid game. Don't be like me. If you see something on the dark web that sounds too good to be true, it definitely is. I don't know when I'll be able to post again. If I'll be able to post again. But right now, I just need to survive. God, help me. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.